Welcome to We Are Fine and Neither Are You, a podcast brought to you by two lifetime besties dealing with the beauty and messiness of midlife. Nothing is off limits. Let's get into it. Okay, hello. Welcome to We Are Fine and Neither Are You. We're coming back to you this week after taking a break last week. So sorry about that we didn't have an episode to drop. But, I was just having a really rough week. And I called April and I just said, I think I need the week off. I know we just started doing this, but I'm having a really rough week. I had a lot going on with my kids, just some emotional stuff and like professional stuff at home. And I just like my tank was empty. And so I called April. I'm like, this is the one thing that I think I need to just take off my plate this week. Is it okay with you? And of course, she was so generous. Yes, of course. So anyway, I was proud of myself for showing up for myself and knowing what I needed and taking a break because it's not always easy to do that. So just a reminder out there to everyone, if you're feeling like your tank is empty, it is okay to say no to things. It's okay to take a break and to be there for yourself and to just have like a self-care week. And that's what I did. And I'm so glad because I'm back this week feeling really good and really refreshed and things are going great. So I'm happy to be here today. And speaking about showing up for yourself, today we're going to be talking to April. She's going to be our interview today. She's going to bravely share her story and the difficult decision she made to leave the Mormon Church. As a multi-generational member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints since its inception by founder Joseph Smith, April's family history is deeply entwined with the foundation and growth of the faith. Throughout generations, they have held steadfast to their beliefs and continue to actively participate in the teachings and traditions of the church, which made her decision to leave all that much more painful. Leaving one's religion can be deeply personal and a transformative journey for many individuals. And for April, this decision marked a significant turning point in her life. Upon embarking this path, she faced numerous challenges and self-discoveries that reshaped her beliefs, values, and even her identity. The departure from her religion sparked a myriad of emotions and changes, ultimately leading her to a new sense of self-awareness and understanding of the world around her. And in this process, she found courage, resilience, and a newfound sense of freedom that altered the course of her life in very profound ways. So, April, thank you for being here today to tell your story. I'm already getting emotional.
I know. And, just having you here next to me, I think it's the only way I could have done it. So, you've been on the journey since, first grade. So you've seen all the different
I know
levels of craziness that this has brought into my life. And you've also seen me on the other side of it. So that's really exciting.
I have.
Yeah.
It's been very interesting for me as your best friend to see you go through this, just to see, growing up, going to church with you, we'd have sleepovers and we'd have to get up early Sunday morning and go to church for 3 hours.
They don't do that anymore, thank gosh. Someone finally woke up and realized that was not a good idea. Yeah.
I remember going to church with you and the whole time I was just thinking about the food we were going to eat when we got done. It was the only thing that got me through. I was like, your parents always made a big feast after. So I was like, are we going to get that big hoagie sandwich? But anyway, no, that was, the food was pretty good. And I will say the other thing that was a positive for me was going to the Mormon church dances with the cute Mormon boys. So I'll give them that. They have some cute boys.
Yes.
And in middle school, that was good.
Absolutely gorgeous.
Beautiful people. I know. I wasn't hating it too much back then, but anyway, no. So not to make light of it because it was a very, very kind of traumatic time in your life when you left the church. And so, I think we should just get into it and start from the beginning. So you were born into the religion. How was it growing up in the Mormon church?
So, I was thinking about this over the weekend, and one of my first memories is being baptized, and that's at 8 years old in this church.
Yeah. Okay.
And, they believe that 8 years old is the age of accountability. So, right from wrong at that age. And
Mhm.
so, I remember being interviewed by a bishop alone, which is really weird,
Mhm.
at that age
That's
and yeah,
scary
it's a little scary. Yeah,
and
because
intimidating.
yeah, and, what are you doing at 8 years old that you'd have to even confess
Mhm.
of any sins or anything? But basically, they were
Right.
asking me at 8, and that's what grade is that in? Is that 5, 6, 7? Is that 3rd grade? I'm trying to think.
8 years old would be, yeah, 3rd grade.
Yeah, 3rd grade. So imagine a little 3rd grader going in to talk to
Yeah.
an adult man by herself in a room, and being asked if she wants to belong to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and so
Mhm.
as a parent now, I just think about, like, you're way too young to even know what the heck you're doing at that age, but
Mhm.
they do. They
And
ask me.
like you're gonna say no to some big adult man in power. Yeah,
I
sure,
know.
that's what I want.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know, but I do that's probably my very first memory of the church, and that actually created the fear of God, and it created the fear of
Mhm.
hell for me. So at
Mhm.
in 3rd grade, my biggest fear in life was going to hell. And I
Mm.
remember, and the next memory I remember having nightmares. It was like a reoccurring nightmare. And I would have a nightmare that I would jump into my pool and I had 2 little bean bags in my hand. And one said, this is how little I was. So one said heaven and one said hell. And I would swim down to the drain of my pool, and whichever one it would suck is the one where I would go. And I remember opening my hands, and it was always the hell one that was getting sucked into the drain.
Mhm.
And just like, that's my little mind thinking, you were going to go to hell, you're never good enough. So the shame culture, the guilt, the never amounting to what they want you to amount to, the perfectionism, all of that was bred into me starting at about 8 years old. And so I
Now
remember.
I just really quickly, I gotta
Yeah.
imagine, and maybe you're getting to this. So that's pretty scary for an
Mhm.
8-year-old. Um, and I got to assume there was some sense of like, I guess, positivity or something that made it fun or wanted you to be there, or
Yeah.
no? Was there anything
Well,
that
I
kind of
mean,
counterbalanced that for you, that kept you going, that kept you wanting to be at the church?
yeah.
Because if you're scared, obviously you're not going to want to do something if it's scary to
Right.
you. So there had to be something that was kind of keeping you there. And maybe it was just your parents telling you, no, this is right. This is
Mhm.
okay.
Yeah.
Perhaps it was
Well,
that, and maybe you'll get to it, but it just
yeah.
kind of made me think that
No,
there had
yeah,
to be
it was
something
hard.
as a kid.
Yeah, as a kid, I think what was fun is what the Mormon church has down is community. So they're always,
Mhm.
coming up with, little programs for kids to come together, once and maybe even sometimes twice a week. You do feel like they're extension of your family. So that's why a lot of times when people leave the
Mhm.
church, they feel like they've left their family behind. And sometimes in, a
Right.
lot of cases, they actually do have to leave their family behind. But there was a lot of really fun activities that way, but what's weird about the whole, guilt and shame and fear is what happens is when you're so deathly afraid of something, so let's just say hell, they create a problem and then they are the solution. Oh, what a coincidence.
Mhm.
So they
Mhm.
sell you this protection from hell. They sell you this protection from not being with your family forever. They sell you protection from making these huge mistakes in your life if you follow all the rules and you squeeze yourself into
Right.
this box. And I
Now
remember.
go ahead, sorry.
Yeah. No, I remember, like, as a child going to church and feeling like I'll never measure up. There's no way, because I was wild even as a kid. I would always, I
Mhm.
remember just, like, wanting to kind of, like, do things a little bit differently. And I remember just specifically going, "Oh, okay, I'm not like everybody else. I think differently than everybody else, or my family is different than all the other families. We watch scary movies, and we
Mhm.
drink Coca-Cola, and we swim on Sundays, and we travel and
Yeah.
eat out on Sundays. So it's we broke a lot of rules. And I realized that. And something I noticed as a child is, like, one of the other memories that came up for me was I remember going on a cruise and watching my parents drink pina coladas. And I just remember like, oh, that was like such a no-no to have an alcoholic drink, And so
Right.
I remember as a child, because I was the youngest of 5, no one ever sat me down and talked to me about anything. Like, being more of a realistic, like, hey, alcohol isn't bad when you're of age and da. They could have easily talked to me about it. But instead, I learned at that
Right.
age, oh, we keep secrets. Okay.
Right.
So when we're at church, we act this way. We put this mask on. And then when we're on vacation, we do
Hmm.
this. And when we're with these friends, we do this. And when we're with this family, we do this. And so I learned how to mask at a very young age. And they
Hmm.
make you think that it's attainable to be this perfect Molly Mormon. And I remember just always just, okay, God will love me when, God will love me if I'm a good enough girl, if I do enough good things. So I was very much bred with the idea of qualifying for heaven and qualifying
Right.
for God.
Do you think a lot of Mormons do that? Do you think a lot of Mormons kind of live this facade where they're the perfect Mormon family, but then behind the scenes they're doing things like that, like
Oh, yeah,
drinking and
yeah. Well,
maybe
I
doing
don't know
other.
about that so much. I mean, I think,
Do you think it's pretty
nowadays,
common though? Is it pretty common?
yeah, I remember going into the bishop, when I was, like, married and kids age, and, I remember telling him I was having a hard time. We lived on the East Coast at the time, and I was having a hard time wearing my garments, so that's something we'll get into. But I remember him telling me, "April," because I was crying, and I was like, "I just, it's just too much with the humidity," and he's like, "If you only knew what the people of this ward," which is basically, your church, "are doing, this is nothing." And so I remember, like, thinking, "Ooh, what?" Like, there's people that are doing bad stuff. Like, you just assume that everyone's perfect and everyone's following the rules, but no one really is. Nobody's perfect.
And you felt and you thought just wearing your garments was such a sin, or not wearing your garments was such a sin, you were worried about it. But there's probably people out there who were, watching porn and like having
Yeah,
affairs on their husbands and wives, and you
exactly.
were just worried
Exactly.
about, what you were putting between your body and your outfit.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty
There's a lot of
interesting.
public shame too, in the church. I remember growing up and, like, it's this weird juxtaposition of, and I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but where you're with your family, everyone's sitting on a row. I remember my mom. So my mom's a convert. My dad was born and raised in the church. So my dad's side of the family is the Mormon side, and my mom's is not. And she resisted joining for quite a while. She did not want to, because
Mhm.
she's also a wild spirit as well. That's where I probably get most of it from. But I remember her saying, "All I want to do is look down the pew and see all of my family sitting next to me." That's all she wanted to do. So
Mhm.
I remember getting to church and, like, feeling so proud that we could fill up a row, and sometimes I wonder if that's, one of the reasons why they have such big families is we want to, like, have our own row. But
Mhm.
and I remember seeing some kids, especially the boys, not be able to take the sacrament. And that's something that we would do every Sunday. Sacrament is where we would take the bread and the water in representation of Jesus's blood and body. And then you were cleansed of all your
Mhm.
sins. And we do that every week in the Mormon church. And so, it was like a love hate thing, because on one hand, you got to start all over again, clear your conscience, and that's a beautiful thing. I think in general, that's what people should do every day, is feel like, okay, this is a brand new day. But then on the other hand, if you were in trouble, if you had done something wrong, then you had to pass the tray. And oftentimes you're sitting next to your mom or your dad or a friend, or like me as a teenager looking out, you could see what boy is not passing the sacrament, what boy is not taking the sacrament. And it's public humiliation. And
So they've done something to where they're not allowed to take the sacrament that week?
exactly.
Is
Yeah.
that is that what that's okay.
Yeah. And it
So
was
they've
like,
sinned in some way.
exactly, and it was never equal across the board. So it was like, in one ward, your bishop might say, if you masturbated, you weren't allowed to take the sacrament for 6 months, and then another one would say, "Well, just take it next week," and so the bishop basically
Mhm.
was like Jesus Christ to us. He would be our middleman from Heavenly Father to us, and he would tell us if we were worthy or not to take Jesus upon us. Like, it was kind
Oh
of crazy.
my gosh.
So that was, the beginning of, trying to qualify, trying to be good enough, trying to be worthy enough, and it never ended. So, it was very interesting that I, even as a kid, I remember going like, "This is messed up. Like, this is messed up that that
Mhm.
boy can't take the sacrament, or that girl can't take the sacrament, or I can't take the sacrament, just because we're doing normal teenage stuff." And so what
Yeah.
that what that does is it creates liars. And it
Right.
creates, this like I said, masking and not knowing really truly who you are because you're being told who you are your whole life.
Right. I mean, we're just human.
I know.
They weren't allowed to make just normal human mistakes. And by the way, or just do what feels natural, which, hello, masturbation is natural.
I know.
It's healthy. So the
And
fact that
what's
they were being
really
told that
sick,
that was sin. Yeah.
yeah, and what's sick as a girl from a woman's point of view is, um, that's basically we were being told that the only person that could ever touch us sexually is a man. And so
Hmm.
I know a lot of women in this church, and it's heartbreaking, but they've never had an orgasm. They don't even know their own bodies. Their bodies are an enemy to them, so they don't know what their erotic zones, or however you say that. And
Erogenous. Yeah.
yeah, erogenous zones. I don't even know. That's what I'm talking about. You know what I mean? So it's like, so it's just sad that they're raised to see their bodies as a bad thing, as a tempting thing. If you show your shoulder, or if you wear short shorts, or if you have too much cleavage showing. And it
Hmm.
was a lot of hypocrisy. It was like,
Right.
we don't drink alcohol or coffee, which, I mean, give me a break. That's like so simple, but we can have, energy drinks and plastic surgery. I
Yeah. It
remember
doesn't really make
yeah, my plastic surgeon was Mormon, and I remember going to meet with my bishop to make sure it was okay, that I had plastic surgery, and he's like, "Oh, yeah, definitely, you can do that." So as long as it pleases the man, we can do it,
right.
you know?
Then you're okay. I remember, at my wedding when you were a bridesmaid and I had a bridesmaid dress that was a strapless dress, and you had to get permission
Yeah,
from your bishop to not
yeah,
wear your garment so that you could
I
wear the
know,
dress for my wedding. And I just
I
thought
know,
at the time, I was like, wow,
I
this
know,
is intense. She has
I
to get
know,
permission to be able to wear a certain type of clothing,
I know,
and
and
of
I mean,
course I felt horrible because I picked a dress that was a problem. But it's like I didn't really know at the time. I didn't think much of it. But yeah, I just more felt sorry for you that you had to go
yeah.
through that.
Yeah. And and I feel sorry for her too. That old version of me,
Yeah.
because I
Yeah.
didn't know when you are born into something like this. And I do consider it a cult. And I don't say that to
Hmm.
hurt, other members' feelings, or I honestly do. And when you really break it down, it's when you can't think for yourself, and when there's a
Right.
higher source of authority in your life, and you're not your own authority. And I look back on that girl, and my gosh, like, going back to our childhood, I remember all I wanted was for you to get baptized, because I felt like I wanted to be with you in heaven, and I didn't want my
Hmm.
best friend to not be with me for forever and ever. And you poor
Right.
thing. I mean, you guys took the discussions, and you put up with a lot of crap that we gave you guys.
Yeah.
And it just was ridiculous, and so, I think about, like, my little timeline. So, getting baptized, realizing that I'm just a dirty sinner, just I could never qualify for what I really wanted to do. And then, you and I would go to the dances, and I remember wasn't there one time we couldn't even go in because our dress was too short or something like that?
I
Or
think I remember that.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was so ridiculous,
Yeah.
and it wasn't even like a short skirt at all, it was like they were making us feel bad about that.
Hmm.
And then, I feel like in high school, I remember I had to make the choice in those days. I felt like I had to make the choice of either I want to be cool or I want to be Mormon. And it was like you couldn't have both, and so I remember
Hmm.
just thinking, okay, I would rather be cool. And so I really didn't
Hmm.
go to seminary, which is church before school. Um, and I remember trying to go a couple times, but I never really fit in with the Mormon kids. They were just to me, they were just so good, and they had it so together, and they were just so much more above me that it just made me feel like crap. And so I couldn't. I
Hmm.
had a few friends that were amazing, and they were so kind and so sweet. I never really actually ever felt bad from them. It was the church. It was the
Hmm.
leadership. It was, going to um young women's, which is what the teenagers go to. That's like the class that we would go to. And I remember I had a very serious boyfriend early on in my life. And we were definitely doing things that we were not supposed to be doing. And I just remember thinking, like, I am horrible. I'm a horrible, horrible person for, being
Hmm.
in love and doing things that I shouldn't be doing. And so it was just it was a unhealthy, abusive relationship that I've had with the
Hmm.
church. since I was little.
Mhm.
So fast forward there, you and I get the heck out of Dodge. We leave Bakersfield, and we move to Washington and live exactly the way we want to. It's kind of the first time I'd ever been free to do what I
Yeah,
want.
you kind of gave up the church at that point. You were totally out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And from my point of view, I almost felt like I'll never measure up. I'll never be like this good Mormon person. So why even bother? So I did.
So I
I
might as well
went
go the other direction.
exactly.
Yeah.
And and it's really crazy when you actually cause someone to do that, because if they would have been more loving, understanding, like this is normal, this is natural, this you're not a bad person if you do A, B, and C. God loves you no matter what.
Mhm.
I never got that message. I didn't even know what grace was until I met a
Right.
non-denominational friend who actually had to like break it down for me. And so,
Right.
I just remember just going wild and crazy and having the time of my life, but there would be times where I'd be like, "You gotta get back to church." If you keep up with this, like, you're never gonna get married, you're gonna be old, and I mean, I was
Mhm.
21 years old, for goodness sakes, and so I
Yeah.
remember having I call it my come to God moment, where I was alone in my room crying, and, I remember my boyfriend at the time, he was raised Mormon, but I remember him telling me, "I'll never be Mormon." And I just thought, "Oh my gosh, like, how could I fall in love with someone that won't eventually, live the life that I wanna live?" I always knew I was
Right.
gonna go back. And so, I just had this moment where I felt like I had this feeling like if you don't go back to church now, you're never gonna do it. Like it's never gonna happen for you. So I started going back to church and I got my act together. And it's this weird thing that happens like when you go from living a life that you've been taught is of sin and empty to being very strict and very disciplined again. It feels good. It's like a weird thing. It's like controlling your
You feel
diet.
like you're doing something right. Yeah, you're doing
Exactly.
something right. You're like, I'm disciplined. I can
Yeah,
do this. Like you said, it's
exactly.
like a diet or
Yeah,
quitting drinking or
yeah,
quitting a bad habit, basically.
exactly, exactly, and
You
so
were
and you're
quitting a bad
rewarded.
habit, which was living with freedom.
Exactly, exactly. So I would meet with this new bishop that was up in Washington for, once a week, and I would just pour my life out to him. And I just remember he gave me the book Tuesdays with Maury, and I would see him every Tuesday. And so he became this thing for me that caused me to feel like I was okay. And so he was just like, you got to get back in the church and you got to find your person. And so I got my act together. I moved back home, back to Bakersfield. And then that's when I went on to ldssingles.com. So you guys, this was 1999, where the internet was still AOL dial up. And I felt like if I didn't live in Utah, that it was over. I was not going to be able to find a cute Mormon, at least. I mean, there
Yeah,
were Mormon guys, but not cute Mormon guys. I didn't even know that that
right.
existed.
Well,
So
and
I
you
get
knew
on,
that you probably knew you had kind of, I mean, I'm going to interject here just for a second because you
yeah,
had kind of like partied and you kind of we were doing what you're supposed to do in your early 20s. We had a lot of fun. But I
yes,
think, your relationship had fallen apart with your boyfriend
yep,
and you kind of felt like that was your rock bottom. Like,
yeah,
okay, that's it. Now's my time to settle down. I want to get married. And you knew the roadmap to getting married right away was to meet a nice Mormon boy
yeah,
because you knew that he'd want to settle down quickly.
yeah,
Am I
yeah.
wrong?
Oh, no, no, that's totally right. Because I mean, in the Mormon church, you very much are married by the time you're 23. I mean, that's like old,
Right.
because if you think about it,
Hmm.
you can't have sex before you're married in this church. And so
Hmm.
a lot of these kids are wanting to have sex. And so how many people are getting married just to be able to do that? And that's ridiculous. And so and in that even made me think of like I remember my mom struggling a lot with the church too growing up. So it was like the woman in my life that I could emulate one day. She had such a struggle with it too, because it was like she
Right.
had her whole family, none of them were Mormon, and all of her friends, she was an aerobics instructor growing up. So we were exposed to, gay couples and, the wild days of having parties and all the fun stuff that comes with that. And I loved my mom's gay friends, loved them. And I was so glad that I was exposed to that, and I was exposed to all the
Mhm.
things that you weren't normally exposed to when you're in a high demand religion like that. And I remember thinking I was so in love with this one particular gay couple that I was like, I, I can't imagine them not being in heaven. And I think that's the first time it broke down to me that because in the Mormon church they believe there's levels of heaven. So not only are you trying to get to heaven, but you're trying to get to the highest level of heaven. It's this weird club that they just
Which is that the
that's
celestial
the
kingdom?
celestial.
Is
Yeah,
that the
that's like yeah. And the only
Okay.
way you can get there is if you're
Okay.
married. So go
Oh
figure for
gosh.
the sweet
Okay.
little single ladies out there that never find anyone. So anyways,
Yeah.
but and so I just remember thinking like, how could God not love them? Like they're the most amazing
Mhm.
people in the whole world. I love them so much. So and I remember my mom, like, she would go in and out of the church too. So we would be really active for a while and someone would piss her off and then we wouldn't go to church for a while. So I didn't really have like a steady Mormon upbringing. Like we were in and out of it too. But I remember like never seeing her stick up for herself. She would never advocate for
Mhm.
herself. And like, we would have a family function and maybe she'd have a drink or something. And then I would see her at the table, like writing letters of apology for not being a good Mormon example. And it's
Oh my
like,
gosh.
give me a break, but she never was able to really, just accept it and feel accepted, I guess. She did accept it, but she was never really like a part of it. So
Mhm.
anyways, yeah, so we get out there, I get back into the church, I find my husband and we're just in this whirlwind romance. It's he's active duty military and he asked me to marry him on our third date. And of course, I was just like, heck yes. Like, he is the cutest guy I've ever seen in my life. So I was not thinking straight at all as far as, should this be my husband? Should this be the father of my children? But he was Mormon. That was really all that mattered to me and that I had a great time with him. So on our fifth date, we were getting married in the temple. And I literally I met my in laws the night before I got married. Could you imagine? Yeah.
Yeah, that's
So
crazy.
that was a whole thing in itself. So that was it wasn't the best, it was tough. It was really tough. So, I was almost like, "What have I done? And who are these people? And now they're gonna be my family," so that we didn't really start off on the best foot, but
Right.
we were still, like, full steam ahead, and what I loved about my husband is that he also had a little bit of a past too. So he wasn't like a Peter Priesthood is what they call like the straight and narrows. So he had a little bit
Mhm.
of a rebellious streak in him too. And I knew like, okay, this is going to work for me. So we get married in
Right.
the temple. And before that, I that's all I really cared about. Like I wanted to qualify for the temple because that was like the ultimate, you're a good girl kind of thing. And I
Well,
remember
tell people who don't know really quick, tell people who don't know about like getting married in the temple, like what that means and, kind of the process of it. And I just think it's interesting for people who don't know or might be curious. If you want to,
yeah.
if is it okay to
Yeah.
share that?
Yeah. Yeah. So you have to be like a high standing member of the church. So you basically go in and you interview with the bishop. So that's like, the like our preacher of the ward.
Hmm.
And so you meet with him, you let him know that you're living a chaste life. So you're not having sex, you're not, and this is if you're not married. So this is before you go
Hmm.
in. But I had to say that I was, chaste. So I wasn't masturbating. I wasn't having sex. I wasn't looking at porn. I wasn't drinking alcohol. I wasn't drinking coffee. I was paying my tithing. 10% of my income was going to the church. I was going to church regularly. I was holding my calling. So a calling is like if they ask you to do something in church and you actually do that thing. And I
Hmm.
was reading the scriptures. I had to say that I believed in Joseph Smith, that I believed in Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. I was not part of any anti-Mormon stuff. I sustained the prophet that we had at the time, meaning like I believed in him and I would follow what he would say. I'm trying to think of
Okay.
all the other questions. So that's basically, just that you were a really good person, according to the church. And then they give you this little paper that looks like a driver's license almost. It's like a little card. And then you go to what's called a stake president, which is somebody that's higher than the bishop, and he asks you basically the same exact questions. And then they tell you if you're worthy to enter the temple. And one of the
Wow.
questions is, do
Okay.
you think you're worthy? And I always thought that was really weird that they would ask me if I thought I was worthy, because I've never felt like I was worthy, but one of the
And why
gentlemen,
does sorry, go ahead.
well, he would just say,
Oh, I
you
was
need to,
just gonna
yeah,
oh, okay, got it. Sorry.
yeah,
I was just gonna say, um, as far as getting married in the temple, what sort of you said that you had to be married to get to the celestial kingdom, right? And so
yeah,
that's kind of the impetus for like getting married in the church and getting like quote unquote sealed to your spouse, right? So that means you're sealed to them for all forever in eternity
yeah, yeah. And
if
that's,
you get married in the temple.
yeah, and that's the thing, is that, who doesn't want to be with their family forever? It's like that's such a
Hmm.
beautiful idea, and it's such a beautiful thing to sell people, especially if they come from broken homes, or they never felt like they had a, good family or whatever it was. It's like, okay, if you live this life and you do this thing, then we promise you this end result. It was a lot of like A plus
Hmm.
B equals C, A plus B equals C. And so growing up in that, you become very dependent on answers, and you become very like addicted to the formula of
Hmm.
happiness, and you think that there's no such thing outside of the church. And so they're very much on purpose doing these things over and over to you. And so going into the temple, the things that were really interesting to me now that I'm looking back on it is, I hate the exclusivity that they do. Like, if you're only allowed to go into the temple if you're what is it? Um a high standing member of the church. So you weren't able to see me get married. Most of my,
No, I had to wait
my
outside the temple.
yeah, my mom's side of the family couldn't see me. And so my Mormon family members were bragging to my non-member family members about how they would be the only ones to see me married, and how what a shame it is that they never became, good upstanding Mormons and all this stuff. It was like a little bit of a rift in my family, and I wasn't going to have it. I said, if my best friend can't be next to me, then I don't give a shit. I don't want anyone else there, and so
Hmm.
when I got married, something that's supposed to be the most precious day of my life, I didn't get a walk down the aisle with my dad. I didn't get that moment. I didn't get to share vows in front of the people I loved. I didn't get to, they don't even exchange rings until the ceremony's over. So the only thing that they really have going for them is it's a beautiful building. Like, everything is white and
Hmm.
crystals, and it really is gorgeous inside, but it's not romantic. It's not kind, it's not sweet. It doesn't seem, to me, it wasn't like this special thing. And what's the worst part about it is, and I know that there are Mormons, more like active members, that will be listening to this. And my goal of this episode is not to make people leave the church. Trust me. Like, this has been the hardest thing of my life, like truly, truly, like
Hmm.
heartbreaking experience for me. So I'm not here to sway anybody out of the church. And so because of that, I won't go into like detail, but when I was married in the temple, I did not get to wear my wedding dress. You're not in your wedding dress. You're in a different dress, and you look like a Starbucks
Hmm.
barista, basically. I'm going to leave it at that. You can Google what it looks like. It's not pretty. It isn't. And I'm very, I'm out there, and I like to have things that are fun and pretty, and I did not
Well,
feel
it's
that way.
your wedding day.
Yeah.
It's your wedding day. You wanted to be a beautiful bride, and
Yeah.
you weren't able to go through the traditional wedding ceremony.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to you probably had to mourn that a bit, not having
I
that.
know. And back in my day, so they've changed since then. This is another reason why I have a problem with the Mormon church, is they change all the time. Like, if God is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow, then it shouldn't be changing this much. But I mean, I could go down a list of things that they have changed with the times. But this one is a good thing. I'm glad that they've changed, but to me, it just proves that they're not true at all. But it used to be you would be punished if you got married. So I wanted to be married civilly first. But if we were to have done that, Joe and I would have not have been sealed. Look, I got my little stone in my hand. We would not have been sealed together for a year. We would have had to wait for a year to be able to go to the temple. And so with that
Mm,
means, if he would have died, then we would not have been a couple in the next life, because we weren't sealed
got it.
together. And that's what happens in the temple, is they It's a different ceremony. It's not till death do you part. It's for all time and eternity. So
Yeah.
they threaten you with that. And so I
They
had to
threaten
make
you. They threaten you on Earth for, um, if you don't follow the rules on Earth,
yeah,
that you're not going to be with your loved ones in the afterlife. So that's
exactly.
their like way of sticking it to you and making you
Exactly.
follow the rules because you
Yeah.
of course want to be with your family, right? And
Mhm.
so
Yep.
they kind of brainwash you to believe that if you don't do all these things here on earth that we're telling you to do and follow all these rules, that you will not see your family when you die. You'll be
Yeah.
alone.
And what I've
That's pretty
realized
fucked
too
up.
is Mormon God is not a nice person. It's like he's not a nice guy. Like he creates this plan where most of his children won't even hear about it. And then the people that do hear about it, most of them probably won't live up to the standards that they need to. So he's going to
Right.
separate families from each other. And I know you and I have talked about this before, but it's like, as a parent myself, there's literally nothing that my kids could do to make me not love them and not want to be with them. Nothing.
Right.
I could be
Exactly.
mad at them. I could be disappointed in them. I could need, a timeout from them, but there's in no case scenario, nothing that I would ever not want to be with them. And Mormon God is set up
Mm-hmm.
for that. He is
Mm-hmm.
a God that comes up with reasons, according to them, to be separated from you. And so I think I had a lot of that growing up, just already my little things were starting to crumble, and so
Mm-hmm.
you got Joe and I, we did the best we could. We really did. I mean, for a couple decades, I mean, we've been married for 24 years now, but we did the best we could. We did family home evening every Monday. We had callings. And that's the time when we were first married was when my sweet brother he was struggling with alcoholism. So he was kind of the wild child growing up and then got his act together, went on a mission. And my mom was so proud of that. She's like, all I want is to have a kid that goes on a mission. And then all I want is to have a kid that gets married in the temple. And so my brother and I were able to fulfill those things for her, which we've realized that doesn't mean anything really. And so when my brother got home, hit the love of his life, dear Johned him on his mission, and he never got over it. And so it was like the hardest thing for him to be able to come home and basically live his life out without the person that he loved. And he was so shy. It's like I think that might have been the only
Mm-hmm.
girl he ever loved. And so I was really upset about that. I mean, I couldn't even say her name without wanting to like just throw up. I was so sick.
Mm-hmm.
But what happened was he turned to alcohol to, comfort himself. And so um I remember, with him struggling, he would call me and just like, I'm going to go back to church one day when I'm worthy. I'm going to go back to church when I get sober. And that was a huge thing in my life because I just remember thinking, isn't church like a hospital for sinners? It should be for all of us, no
Mm-hmm.
matter what we're
Right.
doing, no matter what stage we're in. But in the Mormon church, it just isn't. I mean, you're looked down upon if you aren't dressed right or if you're, struggling and it's visible. I mean, trust me, there's a lot of Mormons that are struggling. It's just their sins are quiet. They look
Right.
different than everybody else's. And so the reason why I'm bringing this up was when my brother passed away. That was when we were newly married. Um, Jojo was about 9 months old, and that's my oldest son. And my husband was deployed at the time. And I was devastated. I mean, absolutely devastated. And it was just the worst thing in the world. Like it was that first time that somebody close to me had died and in such a tragic way. And I remember going to church and there was this lady, and I won't say her name just because I mean, I don't know if she'll ever listen to this, but she affected me so much with her words that it just cut my heart so deep. And she looked at me, and this was like right after my brother died. I mean, the tears hadn't even dried yet. And she
Mm-hmm.
said, "How does it feel to know that your son is in spirit prison?" And I
What?
was, yes,
You
I
mean your
did not,
brother?
right. Yeah. Did I say
Your
son?
brother.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I meant brother. Yeah, how does it feel to know that your brother is in spirit prison? And so basically in
Wow.
Mormon religion, if you die in sin, if you do something, bad and you die, or you haven't been forgiven for your sins and you die, you go to what's called spirit prison. And it's not paradise. And
Right.
so I just was like, I didn't even know what to say. I'm like, I wish I could go back to that moment now and just, give it to her real good. But to think that that is what this church teaches people, and that's what you say to a mourning person that's mourning her brother is disgusting. And
Yeah.
she was pretty high up in
Yeah.
the
It's
church. Like
terrible.
she knew better. It wasn't just like an ignorant girl. So that led to a lot of things in me. I think that was a big chunk of my this is bullshit, in my mind. And then I remember my mom struggling because of it, because she said, if Ryan, that's my brother, if he would have died, from cancer or a car accident, everybody would have been there for me. But it was crickets. It was cricket.
Yeah.
People did not
And
want to
do you
come
think,
around.
and he struggled on his mission during his mission too, because she had left him while he was on his mission,
Yes.
correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so he had a hard time getting through just the 2 years he had to
Yeah.
serve,
Yep.
which I think there was some trauma involved with probably some of the things he was doing over there,
Yeah.
um, in places he was staying and just being away from family in the time that he needed them the most,
Yep.
right?
Yep. Yeah.
Um, and so is there any part of you, I mean, I'm sure every part of you blames the Mormon church.
Oh, I mean, and there's like I'll tell my husband, I'll say, "That's just one more thing that the Mormon Church has stolen from me." I mean, it has stolen a
Right.
lot of things from me, and that was, if it would have been the type of church or the type of organization that would have said, "We know you're struggling right now, and it's okay, and we're gonna get through this together, and God loves you no matter what," and all that. That was never told to him. That would back
Mhm.
in the day. I mean, like I said, it has changed a lot now, and I think they're trying to be better, but it's a lot, and even if they don't say it, like one of the things that just haunts me is I would when we were raising our kids in the church, I remember thinking, okay, I have to like almost debrief them every Sunday. Like I would sit with my kids and talk to them and okay, this now I know they said this, but really this is how we believe and this is a little ridiculous. And I remember my daughter I would tell her something, "Well, honey, that's not really it's probably around polygamy or something, I don't know about that, and that's not really how we feel." And I'd say, I'm telling you these things," and she'd say, and this was after we left the church, and I'm like, "But I told you that none of that was true, or this we didn't really believe that." And she said, "Yeah, mom, but the church was always louder than you."
Yeah, wow.
And you have to realize, like, and that's what I feel sorry for with my friends that are still in the church, and they're good people, but they're perpetuating this disgusting generational thing over and over again. And it's like
Well, yeah.
you think you're doing the right thing, but you're actually like a part of the problem. And that's what's really hard.
Well, we've talked a lot about this. The thing with religion is that you're indoctrinated at a very young age by your parents.
But
Your parents are the people that you trust most in the world. And
yeah,
so, whatever they say you need to believe, you're going to believe that because you
yeah,
love them and you trust them.
yeah,
And whether it's, the Mormon church or whether it's the Baptist church or whether it's Mormon fundamentalists or any fundamentals, cult or religion,
yeah.
that these kids are brought up in, they're taught at such a young age that this is the right thing. This is the true thing. Right. And
Oh yeah.
so
And
it's
it's not
very
like
scary.
the true church. It's like
What?
this is the only true church. That's how we're
Right,
raised.
exactly. So my question is, do you have like some resentment towards your family for indoctrinating you? Or
Yeah.
have you kind of how have you dealt with that?
So, when you say that, the first thing I think of is so again, another thing that's changed is the temple ceremony itself. So, when I first went through the temple, I was freaked out. I mean, it is not anything to expect, it's nothing to be prepared for. One of the things that I really had a hard time with is they make you agree to everything that's about to happen before you even know what's happening. So there is no what is that called? The informed consent? Nothing. No
Mhm.
informed consent and you're sitting next to your parent most of the time. And it's just so messed up that it's like they get you right there too. And I when my parents went through the temple, they were doing things that were atrocious. Like pretending like they're slicing their throats open and pretending like
Being
they're disemboweling
told to
themselves.
do that. Being
Yes,
told to do
so
that.
yes, so
Yeah.
in the temple, there are symbols and signs, and they mean things, and I was so disturbed by just what I was doing, and that wasn't even that. My parents did that.
Hmm.
So when you ask about me being resentful, I'm resentful that they did those things, and my husband's parents did those things, and they didn't run. Like, are you
Yeah.
kidding? Are you kidding me? So that's how indoctrinated they were. And I have to forgive them because I do believe that my parents and my husband's parents were doing the best they could do with the knowledge that they had. But even just having any kind of normal thinking as like a normal human being, you could say, huh, this is weird. This is weird.
Yeah.
So when I
Well,
went through it, we weren't
yeah,
doing
go
that.
ahead.
But I
Right.
remember going to my bishop afterwards and going, "This is weird. There's something off. Like, I don't like this.
Right.
It doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like this church of mine that's so simple." I mean, we didn't even clap in church because it was like too rambunctious, the spirit might
Yeah.
leave. And it's like to go from such a simple church of like just simpleness to this weird thing where you're learning these like handshakes and you're wearing these weird garments and these things over your head and you got to veil yourself, and there's all these like different like rituals and things like that. And you know what he told me? He said, "Well,
Right.
of course you don't understand it. Of course it feels weird because it's from King Solomon's time. It's from the Bible, April. So, you should just accept it." And I was this newly married woman, of course, going from being wild to now here. And I'm like, well, I have to accept this. And what's so frustrating now is now that I've dug deep is I've realized that it has nothing with to do with King Solomon. It is Masonic. It's from the
Hmm.
Masonic temple. That Joseph Smith was a Mason, and he basically just copycatted everything that was in there and
Right.
brought it in and called it a revelation. And it pisses me off that I had done all that. I didn't sign up for that.
Right.
So
I mean,
yeah,
any church that's going to tell you that or make you do a symbol to like you're going to slice your throat and disembowel yourself if you
no,
speak about what happens
yeah,
in the
yeah,
in the temple. I
yeah,
mean, the fact that people don't run for the hills is crazy. It just goes to
mhm,
show you how strong the brainwashing is.
yeah. It really
How,
is.
and like you said, and how they have an answer for everything and why this is that. I mean,
Absolutely.
who cares if it's from the King's Song? I mean, hello.
I know. I know, and
I
not
mean,
only do they have an answer for everything, but they have an apologetic for everything too. They have somebody that can, well, it might have been like this or that, because what happens is when
Mhm,
you leave the church, you start questioning everything. And,
right.
and I'll tell you how I came to that moment, but
Yeah,
what's
I was
crazy
gonna say,
is
let's get to
yeah,
that when you're after you're done
okay.
here.
So
Let's
yeah, so of
yeah,
course I have my little notes here. I just want to make sure that I didn't leave out anything. But yeah, so Joe and I are deep in the church, my husband, and we're doing the thing. And I remember so my husband, thank gosh, he's kind of always been like a rebel. So he would get like he has tattoos and all the things that you're not supposed to do. And I remember him saying, I wonder why they never like call me to work with the youth. Like I would be amazing with the young men. Like I would love to take
mhm,
them camping and like teach them, all the things that I learned, how to like survive out in the wilderness and all this. And I had a friend at the time, and I'll never forget it. And I mean, I'll never feel the same, but she looked at me and said, "Oh, but the church only calls the best of the best to be in charge of the youth." Yeah. And I just remember thinking, "You have no clue." And he was part of, the reason why a lot of the boys would go on a mission, my husband was, and to be just disregarded because he has tattoos, and we had like this little old lady came up to Joe one time and was grabbing his arm and, "Oh, Brother Ulrich, why would you do this to yourself?" And tapping him, and he'd say, "Oh, yeah, these are my stained glass windows," because she'd say, "Your body's a temple," and so we would try to be like normal and in the church at the same time, and it's tough,
yeah,
because
right,
you have the very strict, like holding on so tight that they can't breathe kind of Mormons judging you. And then you have like the loosey gooseys that to me felt like hypocritical, because I'm like, how could you do this and then come back and then do, say everything's fine? And then we were
right,
kind of in the middle, and so what happened for me was I was in Young Women's, which is like the teenage girls. So I was like in that leadership position. I was the president, and things were starting to my eyes were starting to open. And I was just like, there's a lot of stuff about this church that just does not make sense. And it's giving me like the yuckies, the icky.
mhm,
And what another thing that the Mormon church is so good about is they specifically tell you to not look at information outside of the church. So yeah, you can research about the church, but these are the books that you're allowed to look at. And yeah, you
Right.
can question, but you need to go to a bishop to question,
Oh
you know.
gosh, red flag, red flag.
Yeah. Yeah, very, very controlled, environment of where the information comes from. And I remember them,
Mhm.
they would always say, "Oh, but you have to be careful of the devil because he'll tell three truths to get away with one lie." And then you
Mhm.
would see these people that would leave the church, and you would feel sorry for them because their whole life would fall apart, and they would get divorced, and their kids would become addicted to drugs, and all these things. And they would point them out. Now, see, so and so's family just fell apart, or look at their countenance. Their countenance will go, the light of Christ will leave their eyes. And I have literally looked at pictures from me when I was in the church and now, and there's way more brightness, way more lightness
Yeah.
in my countenance, and it's crazy, but they tell you that and you believe it. So, my oldest boy, my JoJo, was a senior in high school, and so we are getting ready to get him to go on a mission because I have now fallen into that. I want my kid to be the thing that I can be proud of, and kind of, I don't know, it's almost like boastful, like you're like, yeah, my kids served a mission, like you just feel really excited. I mean, it is a mission in itself, is actually a really cool thing for kids to do. If it weren't church related, I think it'd be awesome because it's basically these kids go out, you pay for it yourself. This multi-billion-dollar church can't pay for it, of course, but you pay for it
Mhm.
out of your own pocket, and then you serve people for 2 years, which is great. But the problem is that they're shoving this church down people's throats and telling these kids to convince these adults that are happy that they're not good people and they're not living their life the right way and they need to change. So that's the part that I don't like.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Was there any hesitance from you, given what happened with your brother, to send your son on a mission? Was there any
You know,
hesitance?
I remember how traumatizing that was for my mom because, like, when my brother died, this is actually a memory that came up that was so sad. She was so heartbroken that he died in sin that I remember one day she got beer. She went to the store and bought a beer, put it in a little brown paper bag, my sweet mama, and went out into the front yard and just started drinking it. Just sat down on her butt and just started crying and was just like drinking this
Mm.
beer. And I remember as a kid, just like, what the hell, mom? And I went out to her and I was holding her and hugging her, and I'm just like, Mom, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. Like, what are you doing? Like, you can't be drinking. And she said, I want to be where my boy is. If this means that
Oh.
this will be where my boy is, then I want to be
Oh
where
my
he is.
God.
I know. And, for a church to make you feel like you won't be with your child because they made
Mhm.
certain choices in their life, it's disgusting. And
Yeah.
that's what breaks my heart when people say, "Well, the church is, it has a lot of really great things." And, I don't remember my Mormon friends going through that, or they just take that away from you and they disregard your feelings and your trauma that you've had. And it makes me sick to my stomach because part of me is glad that they don't understand and they have no empathy. And part of me is like disgusted that they don't understand because it
Right.
takes so much from you and it splits families down the middle a lot of times until
Mhm.
there's nothing left. And I remember my
Right.
mom going to of course, the bishop to confess her sin because she felt so terrible about drinking. And that mother effer looked at her and said, "You just need to make up your mind. Either you're in or you're out. You need to just make up your mind, Melody." Yeah, no sympathy, no, like, "I'm so sorry that you're going through this and what a effed up situation, but just make up your mind. Come on. Enough is enough," that kind of a thing. So,
Give me that
yeah.
10% and shut up.
Exactly, exactly. So it just I remember like
Mm.
thinking, well, if I could get my boy on a mission, then he's gonna, be blessed for it and it'll be so wonderful. And I was coming from it at that angle. Well,
Right.
by surprise, he was not wanting to go on a mission. And that was a huge deal because again, I'm in the leadership. We're in a ward where, the bishop is making it very clear that if my son did not decide to serve a mission, that he would be the first one in generations that have not served
Mm.
a mission. And I mean, they were throwing everything at him,
Gosh.
like, "We'll
Guilt
pay for
trip.
your college and, we'll get you a motorcycle," and just I'm sure a lot of it was just like in jest. I don't know if they were actually seriously going to do that, but they really truly believed that his life would be ruined if he did not serve a mission. So, because of that, I was freaking out and I would, say little things and make threats or, I was scared and I was embarrassed. And And so I remember one night going into his room and almost like shaking him awake in such fear of like, Joe, you have to serve a mission. You have to serve a mission. You don't understand. And he grabbed my arms and he said, Mama, you have to stop. You have to stop this. And I just felt like such a loser for doing that to my kid, you know? And he said, I don't know if I
Mhm.
even believe in this church. And when he said that to me, I was so dumbfounded and I didn't know what to do because again, it's that fear. Like I don't want to lose my
Mhm.
child. And I just thought I've totally failed as a parent. Like, I'm not a good enough Mormon. This is because I was a wild child. Like, this is my consequence for the things I've done. And I was devastated. I was absolutely devastated. So, thank God that I had the husband I did and the friends that I did at the time because they convinced me that that is not the end of the world for your kid not to serve a mission. And instead, he decided to serve his country. And so I was
Mhm.
extremely proud of that. You know, I was like, okay, maybe he's not serving the Lord, but he's going to serve the Lord through serving the military. So I was
Right.
very happy. But what was crazy is I would go to events and, you know, I could tell the women were like looking at me a little differently, or they would say, how do you feel about Joe not serving mission? Are you okay? You know, and of course, by then I was like, yeah, heck yeah, I'm so proud of him for serving his country. You know, so I was able to, you know, get back at that. But it was really tough. It
Right.
was really hard. So, that was kind of like the first crack. Then my daughter goes to BYU, and that's the only college she ever wanted to go to. She was so excited. It was like her dream come true. She was very much a like did everything by the book kind of kid. And when she went there, it was almost like another fulfilled dream of mine because I never was able to go to school. And if I did, I wanted to go to BYU too, because that's where you get your MRS degree, right? Your Mrs. degree.
Mhm.
You go there to get married. Um,
I've never heard that, your
Yeah.
MRS degree.
Oh, yeah.
Oh
It's
my
good that you
god,
don't
that's
know that,
amazing.
because let me tell you, every
Yeah.
Mormon knows what an MRS degree. Now, I think girls
Oh my
nowadays,
god.
this next generation, they're little badasses because 'cause they're not doing that,
Yeah.
but there are still some
That's
that probably
funny.
do. But, yeah, so I was so excited for her to go, and it was almost like I felt like I belonged, you know, because I had a kid that got into BYU and all this stuff. Well, then 2020 happens, right? And so what happened for me was I realized that, holy crap, I'm feeling closer to the Lord at home and doing my own thing
Mhm.
and not having to go to church for hours on end and do these callings for, you know, hours on end again. And I was feeling the spirit in ways that I'd never had before. Now, that's the little side note about the spirit. I have to talk about this. This is a total mind F. So, when you're growing up in the church, they tell you over and over and over again that the spirit is a burning of the chest. It's a burning in your bosom. It's this feeling, and what the spirit is for people who are not religious is, in the Mormon church, we believed that there was Heavenly Father, so he's like your dad, and then Jesus Christ was his son, which made him our brother, which I know a lot of religions don't believe that, but we believed that he was our brother, come down in flesh form. And then the spirit was something that would never have a body, but he lives inside of us. Of course, they're all men. Go figure. But
Mhm. Mhm.
so the spirit would live inside of you, and the spirit would be the thing that would keep you out of harm's way, or would tell you if something was right or wrong, or would be your constant companion. And it was a gift given to you at baptism. So you had to be baptized in order to get the spirit. And then the spirit would stay with you unless you were bad. The second you were bad, it was gone. And so
Mhm.
you always had this threat of like the spirit leaving you. And then you wouldn't, you know, have this constant companion. And so what is so messed up is I've realized now as a clear thinking adult, with your body and your emotions, it shows up in certain ways. Like this is like a physical thing, like a science way of looking at it. And so in your chest is where fear shows up.
Mhm.
That's where fear is. And so once a month, you know, they would have you speak in front of the congregation, or you would do a talk, or you would do something that would be hard, and your heart would be pounding out of your chest, and they'd say that's the spirit. You're feeling the spirit. But that's not the spirit. That is adrenaline. That's fear. That is, you know, things that are showing up in
Anxiety. Yeah.
anxiety, right? And
Mhm.
so they would cause you to have these moments of anxiety and fear and then call it the spirit. And then now what I've learned is like scientifically, your gut feeling, your intuition is in your tummy. It's not in your chest, it's in your tummy. And so when you feel something in your gut, to me, that's the spirit, and it's like, it's totally
Mhm.
opposite of what they taught me. So that's just a little side
Right.
note. So I just thought, my
Oh,
gosh, like
that's
I
interesting.
didn't even get that right. It's just so weird. So 2020 happens. And I'm realizing that I might have I might be in it deeper than I think now that I'm starting to kind of realize what's going on. And I'm feeling the spirit, I'm feeling peace. I'm feeling closer to God than I ever have at home and not at church. And when I go to church, it feels gross. Like it doesn't feel,
Mhm.
I'm disconnecting. And they call it PMO. It's called physically in, mentally out. So you're physically going to church, but you're mentally out of it. And so that kind of started. That was a good maybe 6 months to a year process for me. And I remember even with my son going away to the military, we were like sending the missionaries to him. Like we didn't want him to like leave the church. We were so afraid.
Mhm.
And then he met the most precious girl, and she brought up some things to me that I'd never heard about before. So like a lot of the racism stuff, a lot of the there's a lot of stuff in the church that I never even knew existed as a lifetime member. And I was mortified.
Mhm.
And oh, no, no, that's not true. That's not true. And then I would go and look it up, and it was true. And this happened over and over again. And then all of a sudden, one of my dearest friends from my childhood, like I considered her like a Molly Mormon, like the girl that was like in her family was like the epitome of Mormon in my hometown. Like everyone looked up to this family.
Mhm.
And she had made the announcement that she had left the church. And I couldn't believe it. I mean, I could not believe it. This girl she got married in the temple. She had a huge family. She adopted a couple kids. Like, I mean, she did all the things that every Molly Mormon would ever want to do. And she left the church. And I couldn't believe it. And
Mhm.
so I gave her a call, and I just was like, you have to tell me everything. Like, what is happening? Like, how could you, of all people, leave the church? And she was so precious. And she said, be very careful, because this is the hardest thing I've ever gone through. And if I could go back and do it all over again, I don't know if I would. And there are things out there about the church that you have no idea about, and you got to go searching. And that was it. And so that's when I found the CES letter. And I remember when I clicked on it, April, I remember my heart was pounding like I was looking at porn. Like I had a
Mhm.
physical reaction to finding the truth. And when I started reading it, I was like, "Oh my god, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, what is this? What is this? This can't be true. This can't be true. This can't be true." And I ran to Joe, my husband, and I was like, "I have found something about the church, and I don't know what to do about it, and I'm freaking out. Like you need to look at this and tell me what if it's true or not. And I need like another set of eyes to go on it." And he said, "No." And he was like, "I don't want to know about it. I don't want to hear about it. You can do your thing and you can be on your journey, but I'm happy. I'm happy in the church." And a side note with that, the men always win in the Mormon church. And I don't
Mhm.
know if it's like that in all churches, but in every scenario, it's the woman that's sacrificing. It's the woman
Right.
that has to. I won't even go into all the details because I know this is kind of going long, and I don't want to be too long on this. But
Well, no, to your point, I mean, really quickly, you could just say, I mean,
yeah,
men hold all the high-ranking positions.
mhm,
They hold all the power.
yeah,
They are definitely benefiting from the woman in, everything in every area, from
yeah,
sexually to domestically. They're being taken care of, and the women submit to them. So of
yes.
course the men are happy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So it's like I just remember like thinking, "Oh my gosh, like this is going to be it. He's going to leave me. I'm going to lose my marriage," because that's what we've seen in real life. We've seen
Hmm.
these families that come in, and one of the spouses stay in the church, and all the people in the church look at them like, "Oh, aren't they so strong?" And that poor thing, and their evil spouse that left the church, like how could they do that to them, And so I
Hmm.
was like, "That's it." The more I would go to this source and I would read, what was freaking me out is it was where the information was coming was from the actual church's website. And so it wasn't like it was taking me to like anti-Mormon websites. It was taking me to its
Hmm.
website to prove all these things. And I mean, honestly, there were things that I never even knew about. Like I was mortified. I couldn't even believe it. And so I remember just thinking, okay, I gotta tell him one last time. And I was like, babe, all right, I don't know if this is true or not. I need you to read it and tell me if you think it's true, And if it is, then that's one thing. And if it's not, then I'll never read it again. Like I was kind of looking for a way out, you know? And so finally he's like, all right, fine. And so he read it, and I'll never forget, he came in with tears in his eyes and said, we're done. We're never going back there again. And not only that, but now we're telling the kids. And I was like, oh, whoa, 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 whoa. Like, wait a minute, wait a minute. You know, I've got one, my oldest kid, I think, was already out anyways. He was like, it took you guys long enough, you know, that kind of a thing. He's always been a truth seeker. But I've got my daughter that's
Yeah.
at BYU, you know, and she's in the
Right.
middle of
Well,
it.
and for those of you who don't know, if you leave BYU or if you leave the church, and you correct me if I'm wrong, they can hold your transcripts. If you
Right,
decide that you no longer want to be Mormon, they can hold your transcripts, which
right,
is terrifying. So I
right.
can understand why you were so terrified of telling
Yeah.
Emma.
Yeah. And it's because you sign a code of ethics or something, code of conduct. There's some kind of contract that you sign as a member of the church to go to BYU because you get a discounted
Mhm.
rate. There's a lot of things that come along with that. So it's not for everybody that goes to BYU. It's if you are an active Mormon, you're getting the
Right.
discount, you're getting the benefits. And if you don't do what they say, they will make you pay, kind of thing.
Right. You
So I
can't
was
have
like, oh,
sex, you can't drink, you can't do all
no. And
these
let me tell
things that
you,
normal
some
all
of the
these
worst
college kids are
things of
doing.
my daughter's life happened at BYU. You know, so
Yeah. To
there's
her
such
by Mormon people.
exactly, exactly. I mean, that's her story to tell, but it's disgusting. Like
Yeah. Right.
that, and I've heard several people that have gone to BYU with, you know, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed kids, and they leave traumatized because it's such
Right.
a repressed society. It's such a like a secretive, I mean, what the statistics are, we'll have to look it up like and source it, but Utah has like the highest pornography, um like paid pornography membership or
Usage
whatever
or
it is.
something? Yeah.
Yeah, usage. So, and then they're like, you know, highest for the LGBTQ suicide rate in the teen range, and you know, a lot of people are on prescription drugs. So it's like, listen, guys, you know, it's not a perfect state by any way, any means. And so I could go on and on about that. But so I was freaking out. I was like, I don't even know how we're gonna tell the kids. Like, I couldn't even tell my kids about Santa Claus, you know, like I just didn't want to take
Mhm.
away their reality, because what happened for me is when I found out that everything I'd ever believed in was not true, it destroyed me. Like it's like
Mhm.
finding out that you were adopted, or like being on the Truman Show, you know, you're like, wait, hold on, what? And I mean, literally almost every life choice I've ever made was with this Mormon ideal belief system behind it. And how could I
Mhm.
possibly live without that? How could I
Right.
possibly, you know, and this was after my dad had passed. So I didn't even have like a parent, because my mom has early Alzheimer's. So it's not like I had a parent I could ask or lean on, or you know what is going on. And my poor husband, I mean, we'll have to have him on sometime, but he was trying to turn to his parents to find out, and they completely were like, absolutely not, how dare you,
They shut
like
you
how,
out. Yeah.
yes. And so, and even like his own siblings were like, what the heck, you know? So there is a price to pay for leaving. And I had to really, I remember just thinking, okay, girl, you're either going to completely ruin you're going to destroy your family and your life and your marriage, or you're going to live the truth. And it was, I'll never forget that crossroads, you know, and it was just like, how could I ever live something that's a lie? And how could I raise my
Mhm.
children in it one more second and and I'll be okay. Like I actually thought I was going to leave the church and just bounce right into like another Christian, you know, non-denominational church and live happily ever after, because my friends at the time that I was the most close to were all of like the non-denominational Christian people, and I felt more Christ-like love from them than I did my Mormon community, which was crazy,
Mhm.
you know. So we come together. Joe and I had I'm not kidding, like nights and nights and nights of just crying ourselves to sleep. Just crying ourselves to sleep, because you guys, imagine giving your whole life to something and then finding out it's a lie, and just like you feel like you don't even know who you are anymore. It's the dark night of the
Right.
soul, you know.
Right.
And
What's been
so
real and what's been what in your life has been real? You're
yeah,
questioning everything.
yeah, and everything that you've said, all the judgments, all the decisions, I mean, just it's humiliating.
Well, I was just gonna say there's got to be a part of you that felt embarrassed,
Oh, so
right? Were
embarrassed,
you
like a
like,
fool.
we exactly,
Yeah,
which you're not. You're
yeah,
not,
yeah.
and for me, I mean, not to make this about me, I I was just relieved when you
I
told
know,
me you were leaving.
I
I was
know,
like thinking to myself, finally, because I was always very supportive of you and your beliefs.
Yes, you were.
Um, as you guys have probably heard in past episodes, I don't know what I am, if I'm atheist or if I'm agnostic. But, so I have, my own specific belief system. And what I believe is, you know, not, I mean, I guess it's becoming more and more popular to not believe, but
Mhm.
I just was so glad that you kind of saw the light a little bit.
Yeah,
It was very, very brave of you. And it wasn't that we still were best friends. We always got along.
of
You
course.
being Mormon and me being atheist never mattered.
No,
It never
mm-mm.
mattered because and I will always support people in what they believe. Just because I believe something doesn't mean that I don't like people who believe something else. That's
Agreed.
nothing could be further from the truth. Um, but for me, I was just relief that you were kind of finally free of it because I had
Yeah.
watched you struggle in and out
Oh,
of the room. And then finally, but no one can tell you to do anything, right? I would
no.
just listen.
Yeah.
And anyway, so for me, it was just a sense of relief, like, oh my gosh, she's free. She's gonna be free. And then after just talk, all the conversations we've had
I know.
post you leaving
Yep.
have been so interesting. And anyway, you finished
Yeah.
telling your story, but I mean, it's been really beautiful to watch you
Mm.
evolve.
Well, I appreciate it because I really thought it'd be a lot easier than this, like, I'm just
Hmm.
warning people, like, be so careful, I mean, I don't regret it for 1 second because I really do believe in that saying the truth will set you free because it has set me free to decide for the
Hmm.
first time in my freaking life, what do I believe? And I'm kind of the same thing,
Right.
like, I don't know what I believe. I mean, some days it's this, some days it's that, like, some days this feels good, some days that feels good. I do believe there's a higher power. I think we're here for a reason, I think that as a society, we have to be so much more loving and understanding with each other. And like you were saying, like we need to just let people be. And I'll never be a
Hmm.
part of the crew of, if you don't believe this, you're going to hell, or if you don't do this, you're going to hell. I will never be that person. Like I think that's like the biggest crock of crap ever because
Hmm.
God, if God is so loving, like I just keep bringing it back to as a parent, there's nothing that my kids could ever do for me not to love them. Why would God be any different?
Hmm.
So that's the whole thing with that. But I finally came to the decision of like we can't do this. Like we're done. We are absolutely done. Like I don't want to have anything to do with this church. Now that I've found out all the truths about it, I was disgusted. I was humiliated, I
Hmm.
was mortified, I was pissed. I was angry. I mean, the amount of money and time that we had given to this church that basically hid and covered up and lied about a lot of stuff. Like one of my favorite prophets growing up, I remember him saying either the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is true or it's the biggest fraud of history. And if you don't believe in the Book of Mormon and Joseph Smith, none of it matters. It's all a bunch of crap. And there's a lot of so
Hmm.
here's my four little categories of members. I think this is my personal opinion why people are still in the church. I think they fall into four categories. Number one, they're ignorant. They have no idea. They have literally, truly have no idea. They've been so scared to look outside of the box and outside of the system that they just do what they're told. They listen to what they have been taught and they just do the thing. And
They fall
all
in
their
line.
exactly. And for them, a lot of times it's every single one of their children have fallen in line. No one is feeling a little differently or doesn't want to do the thing. Like it's always just like everything's perfectly in line. Because God forbid your kid, steps outside of the realm. As a parent, you don't want to be without them. You see like kind of like with what my mom's gone through. I've had friends who children have come out of the closet and they are absolutely not going to be a part of a community that makes them feel less than for who they are.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so I believe there's the ignorant people. And I don't say that to be mean. I mean it like you really truly don't know. And then
Right.
I believe that there's nuanced people, and they're the ones that break my heart because they're the ones that know better, but they decide to stay in. And they know the truth, but they're just like, I'm just going to take this. I'm going to do that. So like, I remember when I first decided that, well, when I was done and I was like, okay, I can't wear my garments anymore. Like, and garments are something for people who don't know, they're a piece of clothing that you wear underneath your clothing. And it's supposed to remind you of all the promises that you've made in the temple. So, pray every day, feed yourself well, stay chaste, stay faithful to your spouse. Like, they're not bad promises. It's good things, like
Hmm.
dress modestly, but you wear them every single day. And I remember the first time I got into the car without my garments on, and it's so dumb, but I actually was scared for my life. Like, I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to get into a car accident. I'm going to die, because Mormon folklore is, there's been people that have been in like a fiery building and everything burned, but where the garment covered, or, this guy was in a chainsaw accident and he sliced his leg off, but where the garment was, there was no damage done. So it's like that kind of stuff. And so
Right. It was a protection for you.
exactly. And as a normal thinking person, I remember just squeezing that steering wheel like, oh my gosh, I'm going to die. I'm not wearing my garments, So, anyways, there's the nuanced Mormons that, they're the ones that are like, oh, I'll have coffee when I want. Sure, I'll have a drink on a vacation,
Yeah.
and they have no
Aren't those
guilt.
called Aren't those called Jack Mormons?
Yeah. Jack Mormon, but they still go, and they're still like a part of it. They're still
Yeah.
doing it. That's another one.
Yeah.
And then I believe there are members of the church that are relying on the church, so financially. So it has a great
Hmm.
welfare system where they'll pay your bills. There's a place where you can go grocery shopping. That's called the Bishop's Warehouse. You're very much dependent on the church, and I think a lot of the members
Hmm.
fall in that stay in the church after
Hmm.
knowing that it's a bunch of crap. So they just stay in because they need the help. And then my last
Right.
category of people that I have you know, created in my mind are the ones who they know better, but their kids are still in. And so, if you're not a member of the church, but your kid is, you're not going to see them get married. You're not going to be a part of that baby's blessing. You won't be a part of their baptism. Like, there's a lot of stuff you're going to give up by not being in this club.
Yeah. If your kids stay in and decide to live the Mormon life, you're going to miss
Exactly.
out on that stuff if you don't stay
Exactly.
in. Got it.
And they're being
That
taught
seems to make
every day.
sense.
Yeah, that you're
Yeah.
not going to
That's
be offended.
logical.
So
Hmm.
one of the,
Yeah.
when we first left, we went to this, it was called Thrive, and it was like with all like the ex-Mormons there, and Joe and I went for the very first time. I mean, it was like we were like 2 weeks out, and I
And
remember
this is like
meeting this.
a different church. This is a
No,
different kind of
this was
church.
like it was like ex-Mormons had got together to like do this like community thing.
Oh, okay.
It was
Got
like a
it.
get
Got it. Okay.
and I remember meeting this lady, and she was like in her 60s or 70s or something. She was older. She was a grandma. And she was like, I found out that this church wasn't true. And I told my family I'm out of here. And, da, da, da. And I mean, she was spicy and fun. And I was like, oh my gosh. And she
That's
said, and
funny.
everybody, they think I'm just a crazy grandma. And I'm like, oh my gosh, could you imagine being so brave? Because I think a lot of times people also, you've lived your whole life a certain way. You're going to be damned if you're wrong. You're not leaving over
Hmm.
something like that. So, and it just breaks my
Right.
heart because, like I said, now that I know the truth, even though it's super hard and it's scary, I mean, there's days where I'm like, I mean, it's gotten better. I'm 2 years out. So that's another thing too,
Yeah.
you guys. It's not like my friends that are my Christian friends that were like helping me out of the church, like helping me through it. They were saying, like, just leave. What do you mean? I used to be Catholic and now I'm not. It's like, just leave. It's not a just leave thing with the Mormon church. You have to, like, we had to go on to a website that had a lawyer. We had to have our resignation letter notarized by a notary. We had to
I
send
know.
it
That's
into the
crazy.
church's headquarters. Yeah. And a lot of people will say a couple things to me. Just quit quietly. Why do you have to make an announcement? Why do you have to talk about it? Just leave. They don't want you talking about it. And a lot of people, like my generation on, we're talking about it because we're traumatized. Like my parents' generation and grandparents and all that, they suffered silently. And so if they left
Hmm.
quietly. Well, we aren't doing that. And I'm not like out there, but people definitely know where I stand. And so, and
Right.
I couldn't do that while Emma was in school. I had to be really careful about that. So, um, we had to do that. So we signed the letter, everything, we had it done. And then they send you back a letter basically saying like you're no longer sealed. So Joe and I are no longer sealed together. And we're not sealed to our
I
children.
guess you'll just have to get to, I guess you'll just have to get to heaven the old fashioned way.
I know, right? And that reminds me of, so when I was growing up with April,
Whatever that means.
knowing that, how your belief system was, I remember being so impressed because I was like, my bestie is a good person because she's a good person. She's not a good person because she wants God to be impressed or she wants to get to heaven or she wants a pat on her back. She's a good person because she's a good person. And that is so impressive to me. There is no reward. The reward is just being a good person, right? But in the Mormon community, it's like, if you're not this, this, and this, then you're not going to have heaven. You're not going to be with your family. Like, you're voluntold to do a lot of stuff. Like I have a friend right now.
Voluntold.
Right? I have a friend who is volunteering at her church because she's a good person, not because she was told to do it, not because that's her calling.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, that blows my mind. I'm like, holy crap. Like that is so amazing to me. So anyways, it's been the hardest thing of my life, but I just asked the kids because I knew this episode was coming up. And I said, if we could go back and do it all over again, would you wish that we could have just stayed in? And not one of them said yes. And in fact, they said, we feel closer as a family now than we ever have. You and daddy are happier than we've ever seen. Like our marriage is beyond good. Like, I mean, beyond good. And it's crazy because when you're under such a harsh control system of judgment and not ever feeling good enough, it's like the saying, like hurting people hurt people, right? And it's like we were hurting so bad inside that we were hurting each other and we were hurting other people. And whether it's on purpose or not, or obvious or not, it's happening. And you see it a lot in these repressed systems. You just have these people that are miserable, right? And they were just like, you and daddy are so happy. And so that alone, like, I feel like we have a brand new lease on our marriage, which, by the way, I do want to renew our vows because I feel like I did not get the proper wedding day. And I'm so mad because I don't even have a dad. Yeah, I don't have my dad to walk me down the aisle, but maybe my boys will, But
that's a good idea.
Yeah, but my kids are like, Mom, we're so happy. Like they're like, we can be ourselves. We know who we are. We've found out who we truly are. And I'm not saying that like life's been easy, but it's okay. Like we can get through anything together. And when we first left the church, when I first realized about it, I was so devastated that I remember running outside and throwing myself on the ground and like crying my eyes out. Like, what is going to happen to my family? Like, if we don't have 50 million rules to follow, how are we going to be good people? Like, if we're not going to church every Sunday and we don't have a calling and we're not going to the temple, like, what is going to happen to us? And I just remember thinking, like, God, please, like, what is going to happen to my family? Have I destroyed them? Have I made the biggest mistake of my life? And this thought came into my mind, April, what about your life do you love? What brings you joy? And I just remember thinking, like, having my kids and being with my husband and our vacations and all of the times that we've laughed ourselves silly and like the traditions that we have. And then the next thought came into my mind, what part of that is church? None of it was.
Right. Exactly.
None of it.
Well, you said it. I mean, your kids, they're happy. I mean, what more could you ask for?
I know.
This experience, just through this whole experience and watching you go through this, I've seen a woman emerge who is strong and resilient and the true matriarch of your family. You really are. I don't want to cry, but I'm so emotional because I'm so proud of you. It's not easy to do what you've done. And I've watched you go through the whole thing. I mean, our entire lives, I've watched you go through this, right? Yeah. And so to have the strength, in a society, in a church, in an organization that is run by men who you've been taught to basically submit to your whole life, to be able to like stand up and say, no, I'm not taking this anymore. This is not right. What a great example you are to your kids.
Thank you.
I really look up to you, and I think everybody's going to be excited to hear about kind of more of your story and where you are now and kind of how you're kind of finding your spirituality and the meaning of life on your own terms. So we're definitely going to have to do an episode about that coming up too. But I just love you so much. I'm so proud of
Oh,
you.
I
Thank you for
love you so
sharing your
much.
story.
And thank you for always being such a wonderful friend to me and loving me in whatever phase I was in, whether I was in, out, up, down, all around. You've always been my steady, my North Star, my person that loved me no matter what. And to me, that is the whole point of this life. That's a truly good person,
Right.
and for anybody that's listening that is struggling with their beliefs, or you're finding out things that you never knew existed about your church system, or whatever it is, just know that you're going to be okay, and the truth is the truth. And that's all there is to it. And you just have to kind of dig deep and realize, like, who do you want to be? What kind of legacy do you want to leave? I think to myself, I am glad that my great great grandchildren will look back one day and say, that was my crazy grandma that got us out of a cult. That's the legacy
Yeah.
that we're going to that,
Exactly.
we stopped it. The buck stops here. It's like, yeah, maybe my parents were in it. They shouldn't have been. They knew better, but not me, and when bringing it back to the resentment thing, I remember thinking to myself, how I wish my parents would have done it. I didn't want to do this. I didn't want it to land on me. Like, I wish it would have been done for me, but I do believe that I was chosen to do this. And I agreed to this, and I knew that we could do this and have the spouse that I did and have the kids that I do. And so it stops here. And as a questioner, you guys, I am a questioner. I'm always questioning. That's part of my personality trait. But that's not the point of this life. I had a really beautiful moment, when I was alone with my thoughts, that, if you had all the answers to the test, how happy would you be if you got an A, knowing that you have a cheat sheet, right? That's not the point of this life. The point of this life is to not have the answers. That's where the beauty is to always be curious, always be looking, always, pick up that rock and look underneath and see what is there, because you might love it. And that's okay. There is no right or wrong. It's like, I'm so sick and tired of those words. It's like, we've got to do what's right for us. And that's going to be beautifully different for everyone. And that's okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I love you.
I love you too. And I wish you were here so I could hug you.
I know. We need a hug.
I know.
All right. Well, you guys, thank you so much. I know we ran long today, but this is an important story we wanted to get out. We wanted to make sure we did it right. And, maybe we'll have a little follow up on it too. But thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to We Are Fine and Neither Are You. This podcast is all about spreading joy, knowledge, and laughter. While we strive to provide accurate information, please keep in mind that we're only human and mistakes happen. In addition, we would like to remind our listeners that the opinions expressed throughout this episode are for entertainment and informational purposes only. We do not claim to be experts in any particular field, and the content provided should not be taken as professional advice. We encourage you to consult with qualified professionals or do your own research before making any decisions based on the information shared in this podcast. Thank you for joining us, and remember to stay curious and critical in your pursuit of knowledge. Please rate and review this episode. Your feedback is important to us.